Breaking news. Did you know that we are under attack?
Could have fooled me.
Yeah, it was news to me too. As I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. That is the opening line from Biden's speech the other night, which
Which is
was
really
under
weird because I go for a walk outside every morning and I don't see like giant firefights in the street or like buildings burning down. So he's gonna have to really like focus in on where this is happening.
There's no like Iron Dome alarm going off, like shooting down mortars.
Yeah. I don't hear any like warplanes, like flying overhead or attack helicopters coming in. It's a very strange state of affairs. Is this like happening in Texas or like where is this happening?
Yeah, the last 1,000 out of 1,000 times that I heard the emergency alarm siren going off, it's because it's the weekly test time. Time to see if it works.
I mean, maybe it's happening in California. Who knows what really happens there? I understand that it's a state that has had quite the amount of duress over the last few years. So
Oh man,
it's
yeah.
so who's doing the attacking? What's going on here?
All right. Well, it seems like the speech, and this is just my interpretation of it. He opened by saying that we're under attack, and also seemed to insinuate that he was basically there when they wrote that Constitution, and because he was so integrated into the writing of that Constitution as the ink was coming out of that quill and hitting that treasonous document, that he just has such a strong sense of belonging with it. And as you may know, MAGA Republicans actually existed there too. They were trying to overthrow the building there as well. They're trying to write the Declaration of Independence, but these darn MAGA Republicans were outside. They were like assaulting law enforcement. They were breaking windows. They were trying to overthrow the rule of law because they don't believe in that. And President Biden told us as such. They don't believe in the rule of law, and they also don't believe in a right to privacy, which was just kind of a strange hit into left field because I seem to be under the impression that the conservative people on the right usually uh, represent that right to privacy, where they just want to. A lot of them seem to just want to live their lives, and they don't want to reveal things like tax returns. But uh, just like their general like life, they just want to embody the same ideology from libertarians, which is just leave me alone and leave my wallet alone as well.
What, you don't want like a no knock raid at like 3 a.m. because you didn't fill out your tax return right? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh man, yeah, no knock raids. I think that
That
they're
seems
so overused.
un-American to me.
Yeah, it just that itself is an interesting topic that always just it almost never seems to be done right, and it's always like there are other better options available, and I don't know why that's chosen for anybody. It's always like they end up throwing a flashbang into a crib and it like blows some baby's ribs out of its body, and like or they're like you could they've obviously, and this is just a small tangent, but there's like maybe a drug kingpin or somebody that they're trying to take down. And like they've been watching him for a while. Obviously, it's been going on. You could just nab this guy as he's like walking through a parking lot and it's just him. It's an open area. But no, they want to go into his castle in a show of force that could possibly be booby trapped, where this guy doesn't know if you're actually police or if you're a rival faction. His wife is there, his kids are in there, and they're just gonna like go in there in the dark into a building that they might not be familiar with. And it's going to end up in a shootout. Is probably how that's going to end, and then you're going to have innocent people die, and then law enforcement's going to get a bad rap, and also you can't interrogate somebody who's dead very easily. And just like why did it have to go this way? And I think it's just because it's a pissing contest.
Are you telling me that the same people our same government, who can go kill the leader of the Taliban, who helped orchestrate 9/11 in a different country with such surgical precision, but police officers in this country seem to fumble the ball. I'm kind of confused on how these sorts of actions aren't done more carefully, especially when I would say
Well,
like a lot of these
I'm not
happen in like
sure.
they happen in dense areas, right? Like we're not talking about just like most drug kingpin, guys hang out in like a barn in the middle of nowhere. That's really easy to like mitigate for disaster. What, like, do court summons not work?
Yeah, I wish I had more insight into the inner workings of how that happens and why they choose the actions that they do. It does seem like there are a lot of avoidable untoward outcomes which happen. And it's not like this is the first time it's ever happened either. It's similar to why I can't figure out all the problems that modern day cars have. This is not the first rodeo. Like millions of cars have been built by hundreds of different companies. You think that they would have figured out the bugs by now. At the end of the day, it's like an engine attached to wheels, and sometimes it has to blow hot and cold air and play a radio or connect to a phone, and then it has airbags. Like it's really pretty simple, I would think.
Oh, it's a little bit more complicated than that because remember the government has to assert itself and be like, every time this thing comes to a complete stop, you have to turn off the engine.
Oh boy. But
So we
even
have to
that,
add
yeah, like
another Raspberry Pi inside there somewhere, to mitigate that.
oh man. Oh boy.
I bring up the police thing because, if you're going to tell me we're being under attack by something, those are the people that I'm looking at. Those are all the videos I'm seeing in the news. I'm not seeing like maybe I see people who are protesting and demonstrating, but I mean that's not being under attack. Last time I checked, but if words are violence, then maybe I'm wrong.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, and words are acts of terrorism.
But the police will always shoot my dog.
Oh man, yeah, that's an interesting one too. Again, just grab the guy in the parking lot. Come on, folks. Everybody goes shopping. And so, yeah, he actually also mentioned the the brutal assault of law enforcement on January 6th, and I think of all the videos that have been released, it's pretty much just almost like the opposite of a tug of war, where there's like a fence or like those makeshift metal fences, and people are just like pushing up against it. But a lot of those videos were just people talking to police, and I don't think I ever saw them actually fighting, whether in a fist fight or anything like that. Like at worst, it was like maybe just like kind of not even wrestling. I mean, there wasn't anything like that that I remember seeing. It more to me resembled a forced tour through a taxpayer-funded building, and some other people who thought that they were King Kong trying to climb the building for some reason, as basically like like the worst insurrection of all times. I mean, like no cars were flipped. I don't think anybody had a knife. I think like the one lady who got or there were like maybe a few people arrested, but one lady had a tambourine, and that was submitted with the official like fax file or whatever they called it from the DOJ, where it was a tambourine, which yes is a musical instrument.
It's
So
absolutely incredible. You have these people who have become experts in 20 years plus of guerrilla style combat in the Middle East. And they have the gall to call this an insurrection. It's like I think you guys would know what an insurrection is at this point. It usually has weapons, people are usually dying, that kind of thing. There's actually like a seizure of power that's trying to be initiated.
yeah, that's very true. I don't know how many people were actually at the Capitol. I don't know if there's a number for that or any estimate, but if that many people can't take over a building, I don't know. Yeah, it's like it's
Politicians are just
pretty bad
not
insurrection.
they're not taking responsibility for the basic fact that for the last 50 years of American history, they've been just shouting on Capitol Hill, Red Rover, and then finally some people came over and now they're kind of pissed about it.
Hmm.
But, they've been messing around with normal everyday American lives a little too frequently, I would say, trying to gaslight them into concerns of safety from their own fellow neighbors, when in actuality, it really is the people down in DC who are fucking everything up. And they're fucking everything up so spectacularly too. Like this cannot be understated with just like how easy it is to sell yourself out for some corporate interests, give them a little bit of legal protectionism, and then all of a sudden initiate loads of inflation upon the economy, which ruins people's savings and forces them to work extra jobs.
And there has been a strange shift in prescribed philosophy where a lot of people think that the government has to be this entity that's solving these problems when all of us as individuals and as small groups who come together collectively, we can help any cause that we want. We don't need to collectively force everyone to donate money to these multitude of causes. You're all allowed to help any cause that you want. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like that's the whole point of charity. We've somehow sort of gotten away from this idea of, we'll have government do everything, which the government also cannot do everything. They're very limited by how much money they could take. So they're always forced to, lobby to get more and more money for whatever these tasks they've taken responsibility for. And I think the people have just gotten used to this idea of like, oh, we're going to have all these government programs and they'll do great. Meanwhile, the government is just, they're just like just slogging shit underneath the rug left and right because they can't solve every problem. So they have to resort to not only using force, but also using fraud.
and I think deep down, people realize that we all have to earn what we get. And it's also, we don't want to part with our own resources. I don't see many people giving up their own home to people who are homeless in a trade off. And I think that
Hmm.
that's because they realize that there is a difference in lifestyle and work ethic, the cumulative set of events that led each person to their situation of having a home and that life that they live, or not having a home and the life that that person lives. It's much easier for me to say, you know what, I want someone else to solve this problem, and I think that they should give money, not me. It's
Yeah,
easy to write a
yeah.
check from someone else's checkbook, especially when it's like this kind of strange, diffuse kitty that everybody pays into, and there's some really bad accounting. And if we like don't actually look at the specific numbers and don't actually itemize everything, then it's just kind of this infinite pot that we can all choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a situation where, like it or not, the American citizens themselves are starting to act like politicians. And this is just, to me, a complete departure of how at least like growing up, it felt like our culture was supposed to be. It was supposed to be about taking responsibility for our freedom. It was supposed to be about going out and working hard instead of complaining about shit all the time on the weekends, going out and protesting this, protesting that. And it's like, well, what if we didn't make a system which you would have to sway the majority vote either way every fucking year?
This is reminding me of my allowance that I got as a child. I got $2 a week. And on that $2 a week, I saved up for Pokemon, and then I saved up for my Game Boy Pocket. And I remember the Game Boy Pocket was $40, so that was 20 weeks just to save up for the console. And then the game, 26 bucks. That's third, or I'm sorry, I did that math wrong. Actually, two
That's okay.
dollars,
It's not
two
like
dollars.
anyone's going to listen to this. Just going up on YouTube.
That math was terrible. I'm sorry, but the $2 a week to save up for the Game Boy Pocket, and then my Pokemon version. I was trying to remember the how much that cartridge cost. I think it was like 26 bucks. But everybody else had that game, and I had to wait and save up for it. And if I misbehaved during one of those weeks, then if I did it bad enough, I wouldn't get the allowance that week. So you have this like extra effect. But with income tax, it's this like tunnel that's impenetrable that no matter if the government is misbehaving or you think that it's an unjust cause, they're going to collect that no matter what, whether you say anything or agree or disagree. And so, because of that, it removes this accountability that they can do whatever they want and it's a guaranteed source of income.
Hmm.
But it's not the same way for us as employers or employees. If I just go to my job and I just don't do my job or I start doing just wacky stuff, like I can be fired. So because there's a threat that I can lose my paycheck, I'm incentivized to do what I was expected to do. But it just seems like the government is immune to that.
Yes, yes, there are. We've completely eroded, I think, the proper checks and balances involved in maintaining a stable society, which unfortunately, like the founders knew that. They knew that this was going to necessarily not work, which is why Jefferson, wrote letters involving or had discussions. I can't remember exactly where it is, but where a lot of this stuff had to be rewritten, or at least he thought that it would be rewritten because no system's perfect, and you can't religiously adhere to a text that isn't adaptable for changing times. Not saying that it should be adaptable. In fact, quite the opposite. So we should have just had, very simple rules that people can abide by, and you can obviously see. I mean, like obviously the world is complicated, so we can't necessarily have everything codified into law, and so we have interpretations, we have discussions. That's kind of like the common law aspect that we have inherited from our British philosophical ancestors, let's say. Um, so you have all of these different ways that we can cooperate without an unnecessary forceful procedure, which I think has been like a major pain in our ass lately with incarceration rates for all sorts of stupid shit. But then you also have this problem with like prison labor is very valuable because it's almost slave labor. It's like governments can't seem to get away from slave labor.
There was recently some group that was using the inmates who were working. So he just went ahead and took him to his house and they built a deck for him. It's like that seems like a misuse of inmate labor, but they were on a work release program. And it's like, okay, work release, yes, but for the benefit of the public, not of like individual guards.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, like even then too, we have to reassess what's really going on here because you're going to have what politicians who are creating more and more extreme versions of laws that built upon smaller laws early on. They're just increasing the consequences of it, and then you're just going to have what a ton of people going in and out of the prison system. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. I mean, like we were talking about this before too, and I'm going to bring it up again now. Things involving drug laws that I think are ridiculous. Like, look, you can go to the store right now. You could buy Drano, you could buy witch hazel, you could buy hydrogen peroxide, and you could chug it, and you would have terrible, medical consequences for doing that. So to say that, we have to make sure this stuff isn't sold because of safety reasons. It's like, well, I could think of millions of ways to fucking kill myself using the grocery store across the street.
Yeah, but a kid's gonna get into mommy's marijuana gummy bears.
And like, yeah, there are consequences for what these things do to your body. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm also saying, though, is that if you have a homeless person who has to do ungodly things in order to get their next hit, that doesn't seem to be very helpful. Like, yeah, maybe they came under addiction, but who doesn't get addicted to different shit? Like, we have all of these different examples too of people being addicted to perfectly legal things. You could be addicted to alcohol, and
Yes.
like you're still provided with, like, you could still go out and be a functioning alcoholic. Now, people can debate whether or not that's, how valid that is. I heard it's not that extreme, though. to consider that is a possibility. I've heard of professors in college being functional heroin addicts. I know of people who are functional cocaine addicts.
Yes, and that is an interesting part of what is reported because a lot of times we only hear about the F ups, the worst of the worst, and the people who are failures and that happen to be correlated or part of their life happen to be very involved with drugs, but like they're medical professionals who are using heroin and they're just, shooting up into their lacrimal glands, like the little corner of your eyeballs by your nose, where you're not going to leave track marks. And so there's no outward appearance of, this is a needle using currently illegal drugs user, or the people who are on the alcohol, or the people who are on Adderall and they can't function without Adderall, or they can't function without their even 7 cups of coffee of caffeine. Caffeine is a drug.
Yeah, we could claim sugar is a drug, any sort of I don't really know if like steroids are in the same technical addiction, but there are people who are psychologically addicted to steroids.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point. You can be chemically addicted to something or psychologically addicted to something like gambling. And maybe you could argue like, oh, well, there are chemical changes in the body because of these behaviors, but regardless, I'm not consuming anything chemically or
right,
otherwise
right.
to it's just an
And to
action.
Yeah, and to like bring everything back to like what we were talking about before, the whole reason why we even went down this path to begin with is to say more or less, look, vices are not crimes. But if you keep making vices into crimes, you're not allowing people to really be free.
Hmm.
And when you don't allow people to be free, they become violent. So the sort of weird, like, I feel like the speech that Biden gave is more or less admitting, hey, I'm doing a really shitty job running the country, just like every other president before me in this last 100 years. Because all we can think about is how to stifle your freedoms to somehow give you back more freedom. It's like, why don't you just let them have freedom and they'll have freedom? Wild thought.
It was just it was very striking how atypical of a speech it was. Instead of, hey, here's uh, a lot of official metrics that can be validated that are not really up for debate. These are how many jobs under these circumstances that we created. These are like specific advancements that we've made in these following fields. But instead, I heard we're going to end cancer. What? Cancer is a pretty broad field, and it's also really challenging. And it just seems like he's just throwing ideas out there. How do you plan to end cancer? By taking 70% of my paycheck? And he says he's going to rebuild America's railroads. I was like, railroads? Like, I don't know. Is that uh, and affordable prescriptions? I mean, the
Yeah, and
affordable
they're all
prescription thing
about
was just weird too.
we're going to create jobs and do all these things. Like, how are you going to create jobs? I thought the market did that. I thought the market did that because we have services and goods that we want to be produced, and so we make jobs that way. So
The
unless you're
gov-
trying to say
well,
that like everything has,
the government can help produce jobs by getting out of the way.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. But like this weird sort of like they'll take responsibility for everything that's good that happens, then try to push away everything that they don't own up to the responsibility they had for making poor decisions is the way that politics works. I just want to be clear, I'm going to borrow from Biden here. Just let me be clear. They are fucking lying to you. Like I don't know how how often we have to say this, but probably very, very often. It just the default is they are lying to you. I don't care what it is, they are lying to you. Like we almost have to take this George Carlin approach. I just like can't listen to I can't believe anything that they say, nor would I want to. How does it even really affect me? I don't even care what happens on a global scale. I could find out that news from someone else who actually lives there. Why do I have to get it through them anymore? And I think it's this they have to control everything that happens. They have to insert themselves in between so they can make money. It's no surprise that if you look at it, doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you look at their fucking net worth just over the last 30 years, you'd be really shocked how many people just come out, mucho Dolores at the end of this shit.
Yeah, they're the best at playing the inside market, and that's really unfortunate. And it's the same thing with the entire pharmaceutical industry, like insulin, epinephrine, which is in the EpiPen, and like these drugs were made over 100 years ago, and yet the price has never been higher in an age where the manufacturing process has been very fine tuned. It's never been cheaper to produce these more effectively to a higher standard. Like we have it buttoned up. The process is buttoned up. Why is it so expensive? And it's because people want to make money off of it, and they know that they can because it's a necessary medication for a lot of people, either daily for insulin or for other life-threatening situations for the EpiPen. So when you have something that people need, you're really the best drug dealer when people are hooked on it. They have to have it. They can't just go without it because they're uh, rolling the dice with their life. So it's the ultimate um, dangling the carrot in front of someone.
They are a good canary in the coal mine for the rest of us too. Um, Mostly because they're at the forefront of that gate. But you're absolutely correct. I mean, and the reason is, again, like it's this really strange idea that the people who watch the news, they're like, oh man, healthcare sector's up in stocks and it's expected to grow over the next, 20 years or whatever. It's going to do fantastic in our returns. And then they're the same people who are like, I don't understand why everything's so expensive with our medical bills. It's like, did you not put two and two together? And it's like maybe there's certain people here that are profiting off of the protectionism afforded by either intellectual property or by any other entry into market that would cause it to go cheaper. Because guess what? If insulin is, I don't know, 1,000% markup, what's stopping another company from coming in? I don't think it's that expensive to produce. So even if they were to cut that by half, everyone else would benefit.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you can see that that plays out really easily at gas stations. A gas station that sells gas for 5 cents cheaper a gallon, people go to that. Not everybody will if it's like a time-based thing or it's hard to get to the other intersection or the freeway exit's hard to get to. But if you had two gas stations and one's across the street and it's 5 cents cheaper, people are going to go there. So 5 cents makes a difference.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this whole like fake divisiveness that politicians have to peddle, that's what they that is what they offer people. They offer a false sense of reality in which you have to feel angry, which by the way doesn't do you any favors because you being angry doesn't necessarily promote positive change in the world that you really want. Like, do you really want to have all this stress going on, worrying about your neighbor being some sort of secret MAGA Republican or some shit? And
Well,
it's
they did mention that about 100 times during the speech, so it must be very important.
it must be. It must be. I don't know where they're all hiding. I mean, I walk around outside. I mean, granted, I am in the state of Washington, so there's probably a good reason why not too many of them are out here. But I don't know why. It's actually quite nice country, quite free, low
It's very
population.
And for the equivalence of the red MAGA hat being the red armband of the Nazis, it's weird because when you see somebody like that with the red hat, they're the ones getting attacked by a mob of crazy people who won't even have a conversation with them. They'll just try to beat the hell out of them and leave them
Yep.
just like mangled on the street, just mob violence.
Yeah, tons of people who are, in advanced age, probably around retirement, not probably having anything to do with the internet, just walking around wearing a hat. And it's really despicable behavior. But yeah, you're right. It's who's the one actually doing the violence here. But I also don't want to be partisan like that because I do want to admit that yes, they are. There is a side that I think is doing more violence than the other side, and yet the other side too. they were resting on their laurels. They're not being sophisticated enough. They're perfectly happy being the persecuted people. It's like I don't know if this is like some sort of tie-in from like their Christian roots or something like that. But my God, do they get a high off of this? It's like, yeah, they're trying to do small steps to maybe help things, but I don't really think MAGA Republicans are doing anything that's really that radical. I mean, for fuck's sake, Trump raised the deficit over his term. Like, yeah, he may have lowered taxes a little bit, but he didn't stop government spending. So he lowered the income coming into the government, which is fine for American people because that's what they wanted. But then he also promised them the same amount of services going out. So you could deify him all you want. It's still also not going to solve our problems. And I'm not saying that like I don't have any particular bias against people who voted for Donald Trump. You vote who you want to vote, but you know, also don't be surprised when nothing gets done.
Yeah, I think kind of anybody who gets put in that position of president of the United States, there one person cannot really change a system that large. I think there's just too much going on, and no matter how much they try or don't try, I think that the the tide, the direction of the river is going to swim one direction, and
Yeah, they're like red wave this fall. Who the fuck cares? Like Nixon took us off the gold standard. Bush was not any sort of friend to American standard of living. Obviously, continued on with the drug war, just like his father, just like Bill Clinton, just like Reagan. Reagan's the one who started
yes,
the drug war. It's just like everyone, can you just pull your heads out of your ass and realize that both of these sides hate you?
yeah,
Maybe
a lot
that
of
might be
those.
easier to understand, but they do because what you want is less taxes so you could have a nice life with your family. That's what I think all of us Americans really want. So unless you can find a candidate who's actually for that and you want to push them in that direction, that's fine. That's great. But don't lie to yourself.
That's why we need a distraction so they don't think about those things. We have to create these proxy wars among the citizenry, try to gaslight, get some rabble rousers in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a good enough point too where we can go back and be like, okay, 9/11 happened and that was an obvious and terrible event. There weren't more terrorist attacks that followed. We were promised all throughout the Bush years that there would be more terrorist attacks and we have to take the fight to them. And if we don't, then we're going to be taken over and all of these things. And literally nothing happened. Sure, Europe had some, and I'm not saying that what happened to them was any less severe or serious. But at the same time, like, look back at your history, like, really look at it and be like, all right, what actually happened here?
Yeah,
What can I learn from this? What can I enforce upon myself as change so I can change my mindset? It's like keeping this stagnant and sterile worldview and just making sure that I'm going to keep this worldview and it's just going to persist throughout time is like it's like anti-adaptable.
and
I
we
don't know.
realize there's all sorts of these strange underlying games that are being played, like how we equipped Al Qaeda and the Taliban with weapons, and we were feeding Saddam a bunch of intelligence from the CIA. So he was working with the CIA, and it's like you can find this stuff online, but it's just not really mainstream news because it doesn't directly help the narrative. And then the Bush family had huge ties to Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the 9/11 was organized by like Saudi people, but that was all suppressed. And then somehow we said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, so we went in there and dethroned Saddam, and then we also went to Afghanistan, but we never went into Saudi Arabia. And there's just so many weird things that it took 20 years to sort of get some information, and it still doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. but we got to feed the war machine. We got to spend a lot of money. Dick Cheney got to make a lot of money with Halliburton, which is weird because he was also the vice president of the United States at the time. But that couldn't have had anything to do with the contracts that Halliburton got.
Oh, none at all. Or the kickbacks that he received, whether directly or indirectly as the big man.
Yeah, so somebody who was like pretty much directly involved in bombing children in Iraq. He's the guy who's going to tell us that Donald Trump is the largest threat to democracy.
And then like Hillary
But
laughing at oh, what was it? At the events at Benghazi.
that's an interesting one. Yeah, Benghazi. What a strange event.
These people, these people are sick in the head. And I will go so far as to say that most politicians, I think there are a few exceptions. There are some good people, I would say. At least I think there are some decent ones, maybe not as well, not as terrible. Let's just say like relatively decent people. But these politicians are anti-American. Like I feel like the true American spirit of limited government, let's prevent, government from interfering with our lives and being oppressive, and let's work together as communities for our common survival and benefit, has been turned into let's mobilize all the resentments we can on both sides and have people fight for scraps. I'm not interested in having this society in which we're going out, every 2 years, every year, and protesting and, trying to threaten violence in order to get things that we would naturally have without interference.
That's fair. I think it's all mostly a pushback. It's things were non-involvement. We were forced to be participants, and because of that, people feel like they have to push back against it. Like Amish people can't sell their animals or their animal byproducts like milk because it doesn't meet this FDA check mark. You're not allowed to take the risk of just buying from their farm. You like have to use the government as this strange intermediary and get their stamp of approval. They're forced participants, and it's weird to have this involvement hoisted upon us where like we're all being just like dropped into this coliseum when we didn't want to participate. We just wanted to be left alone, but you're not allowed to. You can't collect rainwater. You can't buy milk that came directly out of a cow because it wasn't pasteurized or homogenized, and you can't buy like anything that's raw. It's just very strange. You can't live off the
Yeah,
grid. You're like not allowed to. Like you have to be connected to the water if it's available, or otherwise they'll condemn your property, evict you, and say that it's a condemned area.
yeah, like aren't these obvious obstructions to justice that we should be fighting? I mean, it seems so to me. Like the whole existence of property tax seems wrong that we have to rent our land from the government. Oh, hope to God that you're productive enough to even pay for it. And it's like, this is just counter to the way that uh, our forefathers had envisioned this country. I feel 100% certain saying that there's no doubt in my mind that despite them thinking that government was a necessary evil, they wouldn't be looking at our government like, what the hell did you guys do?
Created a monster.
Yeah, yeah, they did. Absolutely. I
I
mean,
just
like,
feel
go
I
ahead.
personally feel so disconnected from what I'm giving my money to and then where it's ending up. It just feels like it's evaporating, or that I'm not really, for every dollar I give, I'm getting less than a penny back in benefit. I feel like I'm paying into insurance that never gives me a benefit.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And insurance itself is like the company exists as like a miniature form of government to tell you if you get paid or not. So again, it's like one of those weird things of like, I think medical services would actually go down in price if you can negotiate with your doctor and say, I'm not paying for that. Because then the doctor will come back and be like, oh no, this person's not going to pay for something that I just serviced them. Well, maybe I can lower my price. Maybe I can take a little hit. It's like, sorry, but like a lot of doctors make, one could argue, surplus amount of value for what they provide.
This is interesting.
I'm not saying
I
I'm not saying this to downplay. medical education, exact opposite. But like, are you telling me that a college professor, who can make $55,000 a year compared to a medical doctor who has, like I understand a lot of that has to go to insurance, so doctors aren't sued. But again, like now we're talking about insurance again, where it's like, okay, well, you're you're forced into a system where doctors get overpaid so they can pay insurance companies more.
It kind of leads me into the court system and how they do entertain frivolous lawsuits in addition to legitimate lawsuits because we've removed the power to appropriately adjudicate things and say, okay, this is legitimate, or okay, this is ridiculous and this should not be entertained at all. No one should spend their time nor their money nor someone else's money pursuing this.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that like the amount of like EMTs and paramedics that show up on site when people are having, sometimes the worst days of their lives, literally, uh, we don't pay them very much. Not to say that, I mean, they should be paid more, but I can't see why something like Uber can't exist for ambulances and things be very reasonably priced.
That's an interesting point. And I know some people do use Uber to go to the hospital, and then there was some sort of battle a few years ago where you had to say that you didn't have an emergency because the Uber people didn't want to be responsible for it. But also the reason that people are choosing Uber in the first place is because their perception is that an ambulance ride is really expensive and that their condition is not so severe that they can make it in an Uber, or they're just taking that risk because the financial burden has taken precedent over their medical choice.
I wasn't saying that they should ride in an Uber to the hospital. I'm saying that like just a pay system like Uber, where when you order an ambulance, it's like you can just pay right then and there.
Huh. Interesting.
What I'm trying to get to is that there are plenty of ways that we can decentralize the system, and you'd be surprised how much more affordable care that you would get without any sort of Affordable Care Act. Shockingly,
Or
because
if
you
any,
don't have a bunch of middlemen working the system in order to try to get insurance and then not allowing people to, receive the service that they already paid for.
it seems like all these acts, only like 15% of it actually goes to that act. Like, I don't know, I thought part of the COVID Relief Act was about setting up detectors in school that sense when kids are vaping. And it was like, what? Even though the money that is passed that's supposed to go towards a specific goal, even if we think that goal is a waste, it's not even going to that wasted goal. It's going to even less tangentially related topics.
It's
Uh,
just, uh, yeah, I feel exactly the same way. We're at a situation where we're getting forced to pay for more and more things that don't have any direct benefit for us, and we're being fooled into thinking that this is just fine. I mean, on top of that, too, we also have a problem with like, as soon as you think that medical care is being taken care of because you have insurance, means you're not saving for medical emergencies. You're not saving, like if you think you have social security that is going to come in and pay for your um expenses in old age, then you haven't, like, that would, I wouldn't be surprised if that caused people to not save as much money for retirement as they could have. That this is changing our behavior.
yeah,
And yeah,
that's the same thing with anytime you're guaranteed a loan essentially or guaranteed payment of some sort. If you like, so I do believe in some form of universal health care, but at the same time, I do have trouble reconciling this because if you know that your healthcare will be taken care of, you're going to have more. My classic example, kids jumping off the roof with their skateboard and getting hurt, and their parents are less incentivized to say, hey, don't do this because it's not coming out of my pocket. They just know that this coverage, this safety net exists. So if, and in the same way with an educational loan, colleges can charge whatever amount they want because they know that there's this federal student loan that, hey, well, the government pays me and it's up to the student to figure out how to pay the government back through their uh, partnerships with the banks. It's as
Yeah,
long as they get their money, then it doesn't really matter. And then you also don't really have a direct connection between the quality of the schooling that you receive and that education, because as long
it
as you're
also
going to college, you're paying $20,000 to $50,000 a year, and you don't even have to produce a good degree for them because you can just say, well, it's on them to get the degree. It's just like they're selling a guru program, and instead of you making money directly, it's we're going to give you the tools to succeed, and then if you fail with your um, human studies and whatever degree you got, your spiritual friendship degree, and you can't get a job, well, that's on you. But it doesn't really matter because I still made $80,000 off of your attendance here.
right, right. And I think another good takeaway for people is to realize that, I think you really nailed it on the head there with the guru example, because then it's like, okay, well, we have an entire federal branch dedicated to school accreditation, and you have a bunch of kids that can't pay back their loans because their education is insufficient for what the market needs. So, I mean, that should prove to you right then and there that it's a completely useless program to have, and we should not fund it. I mean, there's all these weird things where people think that we will not have the thing that we want if we take away the government program. You already don't have that thing.
And something interesting here too is a lot of student loans, there is no credit check. So you really are guaranteed certain forms of loans.
Yeah.
And so it's guaranteed debt, which means guaranteed income for somebody. And also, then we're just going to hoist part of that or attempt to hoist part of that onto the American taxpayer and have them pay it off as well. So, uh,
Specifically, the people who aren't having the most luck with whatever career path they have chosen.
it's like,
So
oh,
it's
you
like,
didn't go to college? How about you pay for someone else's college tuition
yeah,
as well?
yeah, no, it's barbaric. It's like if you're talking about it, like America's under assault. Well, I can tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from
We are,
DC, and it's on
yeah,
everybody else here.
we are under assault from on high, from the
Hmm.
powers that be.
Yep, it's because of the real pandemic that's happening in this country. It's that Americans are weak, they're stupid, and they're cowardly.
And if you had to assign a percentage to unity, if you had a group of people, what percent of those people would be together? Would you say like if 40% of a group is very enthusiastic about the speech they're attending, would that be unity? Just like roughly. And you'll see
I
where I'm
couldn't give
going
you
with
any.
this in a moment.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, so
Probably.
well, just on the video that I watched of the speech, which was the C-SPAN version on YouTube, so 238,000 people watched it at the time that I did. 3.8 thousand people chose to click the like. So that is a disclaimer. Maybe more people liked it than that. So that's why I phrased it specifically. 3.8 thousand of the 238,000 views are likes. So that's 1.6% of the viewers chose to click like. So if we consider what I just said, I don't think that 1.6% of people who were just moved and emotionally supportive of what they just heard in the last 25 minutes is really a remarkable, well, it is a remarkable number, but not in the way that it should be. Because we
Oh
heard
yeah,
about rebuilding America's railroads, affordable prescriptions. It's like, weren't you vice president for 8 years? Didn't you have some? Haven't you been in politics for like 45 years? What happened to? Did you try that at all in the last 45 years? Like
he's
imagine
locked up a
somebody
lot of
who
people for drug crimes. I mean, that's his main accomplishment, even though his son's a raging addict.
that's really sad because our prison system needs to be redone. Its for-profit motivation needs to be reevaluated. The three strikes rule needs to be reevaluated because there are people who are currently doing life in prison for possession of marijuana or theft of a VCR video cassette.
I do want to extend
And
a small branch to the people who are like, yeah, but they committed crime. It's like, yeah, but like you could really qualify that crime with being like if you really had to search in your heart of hearts, like, was that crime worth the or is the punishment worth the crime? Like,
Yeah, it's
because
almost
like
like a
they,
technicality.
yeah, because like these people come out and what, they can't find jobs because businesses decide that they can screen for that, and we don't really give second chances. So
Yeah, there's
hopefully you never get to fall off the wagon. But for people who do, Jesus, it's like a cliff.
exactly. There's no road to um, re-entry into society in a way that's really meaningful. Because if you are a felon, which there are many people who have felonies who are, I would say, unjustly assigned that label, you can legally discriminate against someone who has a felon or has a felony on their record. That is a form of legal discrimination that they're allowed to do. And that really sets you up for failure with trying to get food stamps, Section 8 housing, which all of those have their problems anyways. But when you can't get assistance anywhere else and you're in this hole and all the ladders have been taken out, it's understandable, even if it's not acceptable by our other standards, to do what their choices are understandable. They say, wow, well, the easiest thing to do is to just go back to my old ways because I know how to do it and I know that it brings in money. So your hierarchy of needs has changed. And especially if people feel like they've been unjustly accused or they took some sort of strange plea bargain. It's really strange. And just people who are nonviolent drug offenders, especially, like maybe they've had a large amount of marijuana, which is also strange because it's legal either recreationally or medicinally in many states. So how is it that some people are doing years in prison for possession of a substance, a plant that is legal elsewhere? Very
Yeah,
strange.
yeah. No, I think there's something to do with like it's very strange that Biden would decide not to repeal uh, marijuana off the Schedule One list. So I think that there's either a personal thing that he has with that, which is again odd given his whole family situation, or that they're trying to leverage that for some sort of reason unknown. It just seems weird that we would have uh, we would have gay marriage, not legalization of pot. I don't know. It
Oh,
just seems
interesting
like very
comparison.
odd. I think it's
And
odd because like they kind of grouped into the same, like when I was growing up, like these are the things that liberals fought for, which I think are perfectly like fine, innocuous things because they've been proven rather to be fine and innocuous generally. It's just, what are you giving? Like they're literally fighting for freedoms that have been taken away from us, that the government shouldn't be able to tell me what I can and cannot do with my own body.
yes, freedom of our body, especially when it's the only potential harm that could happen is if it's just me doing it. So I know that kind of gets into murky water if you're on drugs and then you start driving. That's kind of a different game. You could say, okay, that's not
Yeah,
okay
but
to do.
we have rules around that, and it's not like they decided to prohibit alcohol again.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that alcohol is by far way more damaging to the body and to others socially than marijuana. If every I'll just create this example. If every abusive father who likes to come home, drink, and then just pummel his wife and hit his kid, if he would just consume some Mary Jane and just chill out, the world would be a better place.
I mean, I don't want to
Yeah,
get too much into the specifics about it because I think the general principle
the
is still kind of overriding. But you're right. I mean, it's just even if you look into the specifics, there's even more of a case for it to be legalized. But anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic. We've gotten way off of where the speech should be. You know, it's it was a dumb speech. It was a dumb speech with really bad lighting, something that was purposely made to convey an obvious threat.
it's very
Um,
intimidating.
the strange thing with the Marine guys in the background. Now, I'll be honest in saying that I haven't watched too many presidential speeches, and maybe they do hang out in the background, and I haven't really noticed them. It was just obviously striking with that coloration. on the back wall that it seemed like, am I watching V for Vendetta right now? Am I watching some sort of strange new fascist regime being implemented? And the answer is probably yes, because the socialism in this country keeps increasing, and then everyone can't figure out. They're like, "Oh man, capitalism's so bad; it just keeps getting worse year after year, even though we're becoming more and more socialized." So it's like, I don't know what to really tell you guys. You haven't really thought this through, or the gaslighting provided by your overseers has just been too intoxicating.
When I saw a picture of that speech, I was just shocked at how intimidating it looked. I was not expecting anything like that. And I know you could just say, oh, well, it's just red. But red is supposed to be striking. Red is the color of blood. It's supposed to get your attention. It's always, if you go to a ball and someone is wearing red in a sea of black, it gets your attention. As far as the Marines, that is interesting. Someone brought up to me the Hatch Act of 1939, which says that activity directed toward the success or failure of a political party or candidate for a partisan political office or partisan political group is not authorized, and a military member may not use official authority to influence or interfere, be a candidate for, hold or exercise functions of a civil office, participate in partisan political campaigns, speeches, articles, TV, or radio discussions, serve in an official capacity, or sponsor a partisan political club. I know that's kind of legalese, but that was off of Army.mil article that I was looking up about the Hatch Act, because I'm assuming that Marines are probably at most presidential speeches, but it did seem that as opposed to just a report of almost like a business summary of how the country's doing, it just seemed to be an attack on this so-called like MAGA Republican group, and the Marines being present may be perceived by some as like supporting the regime. And I don't know, it seems like really circumstantial, but it was an interesting point to bring up because of the political nature of the speech, which is opening by saying that we're under attack. And there has been a lot of violence in our streets for various reasons, some of which I would imagine are political, but it doesn't seem to be like as it was described in the speech.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feels like we have such an emphasis on the political now because our economics has been so restrained that we're forced to fight in this weird arena. So I think that this sort of like violence is more or less inevitable as socialism increases, because as socialism increases, centralization increases. And so the way that I'm looking at it is you should fight for the freedoms of this country. You should also look into see that, I'll be honest, the whole thing with MAGA and the Trump phenomenon and his presidency, not that so overly spectacular that you should die from it. You know what I mean? Like, it is stupid that they're going after them for sure. But I would almost tell those people like why would you just go out and start signaling this stuff like willy-nilly too, if you know they're coming after you? Like, you almost have to be tactical in some way, like believe what you believe, but also like realize that there's this public eye component. I feel like it's the same people who say that the gay pride parade stuff is over the top, and yet they go downtown with like this giant flag of like Trump 2020 fireworks and whatever shooting off of their fucking truck. It's like, well, maybe that's also a little bit much. Like, maybe this guy isn't your second coming of Christ that you should be worshiping. Like, I'm not sure how this fits into their worldview. The guy is a shady dude. And even though, like I said before, his presidency wasn't the worst thing in the world. It also wasn't great, and he also didn't really handle the whole transition of power very well. Very, like, if it was contested or not, we should always be, I think, on our toes involving that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, like there's no problem in contesting, I would say, an election if you think that there is some sort of foul play being involved, because that's just a good like I don't know. I'm an audit guy, so like it's good to have independent testing, right? Like I'm not crazy for thinking that. You shouldn't just like go off of what people tell you.
Yeah, maybe it's just that people didn't trust the methods that were in place, so they felt their only outlet to express how they were feeling on both sides are just these. There's only an extreme reaction because all the normal roads are closed.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly I think where we're getting to is that we don't have any of these peaceful alternatives that are useful.
We're getting to the only trust you're not allowed to verify stage.
Yes. Yeah.
That's like we conducted an internal review and we found that we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. We should be fighting for more checks and balances in that way, and realize that you'll get pushback from that. Absolutely. So, my suggestion to people would be like, you know what, just be a little bit more sophisticated, learn the laws a little bit more, because like if these are just truly, if they're doing truly illegal behavior, then you can take that to court. And so, like, there's kind of like a put up or shut up sort of feeling that comes from it. Like, because if this is the hill that you're going to die on, then I would hope that you would do everything you can to make sure that you don't die on it.
Yeah, you gotta really choose which hill you want to die on. Is it as is it really the one that's gonna make the biggest difference?
Yep, because you know, in the same way that we're talking about like people who are very invigorated and willing to fight, like that's admirable in its own way. But at the same time, if you're not willing to pursue other avenues to perhaps avoid bloodshed, then do you really want the thing that you're fighting for, or do you just want to fight?
Mm.
Some people just want to fight. I get it. Like you're, at this point in time, extremely frustrated with the way everything's going on. Fine, I get it. But if you want any sort of movement on this front, realize that it isn't just like you becoming a new dictator to take over the United States and change it to your whim. There are a bunch of other people that live here. So the best thing you could do is to just go out and talk to them. Yeah, I think like we're getting to a point where a simple formula is sort of bubbling up. It's like, okay, just buy some gold, buy some silver, have a little bit of land, maybe grow your own food, a little bit of your own food, and talk with your neighbors. Like it doesn't seem that difficult. Learn how to defend yourself. And that's it. Like we can't be beholden to these news cycles that are constantly giving us actors in the form of politicians that have to constantly incite us to action. Yeah, just ignore them. You live in a peaceful country, just about. Like I would say that the you could look on record, like violence has decreased to where it used to be in this country quite a bit. Relatively peaceful.
They're all interesting points to consider, and it feels like I- probably most people would feel like it's a tensious time, like there is an increase in pressure, and maybe the difficulty is putting our finger on the number of points about why we think that that is, and maybe we feel like our voices are not being heard as much. Maybe that's because there are so many people. Maybe we just feel like too many people have access to what we feel like we've earned, that we're giving allowances to everybody without our permission. I'm not really sure. It's a very new territory that we're wandering into.
Yeah, yeah, I would say yes and no. We do have to be careful about the slipping into again, just like um coming out and picketing only when we want stuff. It's like if you just kind of reformulate to just wanting to be left alone, I feel like you have you're looking at the world through a different lens. You're not looking at it as a like what can I extract from other people. You're looking at it as how can I just be left alone. And like what you said before about living off the grid and not being able to sell your own stuff, I mean, like, fine, then find a different way. You can give food away to people, sure. Like you could do some sort of informal thing. I'm not advocating for anything illegal, but you can get creative.
I think getting creative, yes, that is the first step. But what happens when they remove all the other methods that you like the only way to do what you want to do now is by these strange acrobatics and circumventing the I think if you try to circumvent the law or avoid things, you end up with our tax code, which is like they're not doing anything illegal. It's just that it's so inordinately complex in order to stay legal that it becomes incredibly inefficient.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we have to avoid politics altogether. Maybe I haven't uh, been super obvious on that end, and I probably haven't been. But I think more or less it's like we need to know what we're fighting for and not allow the terms and conditions to be told to us by the people who are currently representing us. We should be telling them what to say, so
So it
yeah, I
does
think
seem like it's becoming a top heavy organization instead of
yeah.
rule like bottom up, where we are, like a human pyramid and
Mhm.
they're resting on everybody beneath and their strength. But now there's a whole lot of people at the top that are saying push harder.
I mean, I think one of the easiest ways, and I do have to hand it to the people on the left. There is an idea of you defund the enforcement branch, and they don't have as much like power over you. There are other ways that you can protect yourself. You can get your neighbors together. I mean, private security forces exist. I'm not saying forces, private security personnel. Let's put it that way, because that forces sound like it's more militia or something like that. But I mean, if they didn't work, then politicians and celebrities wouldn't have them. There are plenty of things that can be taken care of by normal human beings operating in a non-coercive manner. I fully believe that. I don't think that we have to live in this weird, strange cult in which everything has to be provided for or else. But
Many ways that
people will
we can.
do they'll do what they want to do. I mean, like if you feel like you want to do something about it, you'll do something about it, and hopefully part of that just is involving educating oneself on the different avenues, being creative and working with people instead of against them.
It's definitely a good point. We do need to focus on the teamwork aspect. I think the problem comes in wanting to force other people to take action on our behalf.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. It's a hard balance between wanting to be left alone and you could be persuasive, but I think people also need to realize that there's like a line in persuasiveness where it's just like, look, just at a certain point in time, you cannot deontologically um, force anyone to do anything. That's also an antithesis to like what your goals are. So it's like, you can't persuade everyone, and you don't have to stalk them in order to try to change their mind. Um, it's just like in sales. Like, what happens when a salesman doesn't make a sale? He goes and finds someone else.
Yeah, so it's a thing of it's based on respect.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think what I'm trying to say is that we have to get back to having our own standard of morality and act through that. But
And
I think
everything
we've
else
gotten
will
to a
fall into
point where,
place.
yeah, yeah, where we're fighting for like things here and there. Nothing's consistent. Nothing has any real basis for a consistent worldview that um, we're operating in. It's just they're fighting for something that they the people in the news, in the media, and our politicians have told us to fight for.
Mm. Yes, I like this idea. Maybe we should reevaluate our own philosophy. So not any perspective provided by social media or the news, a
Yeah, get rid of
principles
news.
first.
Yeah, just get rid of it. I mean, I don't know. When was the last time news really benefited you in any way, shape, or form? I mean, like
If it,
I'm serious about that. It's if you really think about it, all
yeah,
it
it's all
does,
sensationalism and just if it bleeds, it leads.
yeah, yeah. Like I probably would have been better off if I didn't see that damn Biden speech. But
And I was forced to watch it that way we could cross-examine
Oh yeah, yeah. The only way to do
it.
that so we could witness the rise of Darth Brandon.